From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join our conversations. Today we are recording on July 4th. Jim is wearing his Captain America t-shirt.
Freedom!
Captain's a bit of a stretch. You're a tenderfoot at best.
Lieutenant.
And now, broadcasting from Mandalay Bay, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Yes, so we are on the poolside of Mandalay Bay in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, celebrating our 4th of July, and I'm pretty proud of us, Nick. We're not tech guys, but we ditched Scott in the studio, and we are doing this out in the sun, and yeah, so what are you drinking there, Mr. Tangeman?
Pina colada.
Ooh!
It's not a vacation until I've had my first pina colada.
That's really cool. Did you have to kiss the male bartender on the mouth to get that? Or does he just hand it to you?
Did I have to?
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah. I wasn't required to. I mean, I also tipped him. Just the tip. So that's cool. So you got your pina colada. I am more of a Corona and lime kind of guy. Nothing says America like Echo in Mexico. So, yeah, Corona and lime, but we are in fabulous Las Vegas. It is a very tender 105 already.
Nice and cool.
Yeah, nice and cool. So it's beautiful out here, and the sun is shining, and we are lounging on our little chairs, and people are staring at us wondering what the hell we are doing.
It's fine.
But it's beautiful out here. So happy 4th of July, everybody, even though you are listening to this definitely not on the 4th of July. Right. I hope you had a good 4th of July.
And to our listeners overseas and in other countries,
yeah,
nothing special.
Happy America Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy Everything Matters Here Day. So, yeah. We gave you jazz. We gave you KFC.
End of list.
We gave you Panda Express. Ironically. It's really big out in China. But yeah, so lots of cool things going on, and we're starting off today by not talking about America, right, Nick? The research today did not come out of America.
Correct. This comes from the United Kingdom, our neighbor across the sea, across the pond.
I've heard of those people, fog breathers.
Right, so the United Kingdom announced a national ban...
American Bandstand?
Yeah, right. A national ban on so-called gay conversion therapy. This made the news recently.
Yeah.
Nevada actually banned this practice back in 2017.
Yeah, I remember that. And I remember actually testifying to the Nevada Assembly about that, so it was a really big deal.
Excellent. So we should explain to our listeners what exactly it is that we're talking about.
Yeah, so gay conversion therapy. Okay, so everybody assumes that psychology can pretty much do whatever it wants, and that we all have magic powers, and this is true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, the magician's code.
I don't think anybody assumes that.
Nobody assumes that, yeah. So, so gay conversion therapy is this technique or series of techniques. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but the goal would be to assist somebody in changing their sexual identity. And so the theory is, hey, if John Doe turns out that he is gay, and that doesn't work for him, or that doesn't work for his family, or that doesn't work for his religion or his culture, there is a form of therapy which attempts to convert John from gay to straight. And so it has existed in history for a really long time. Even Freud was using this back in the day. It became really problematic in the last couple of years, really last decade. There was stories about people that were forced into it, which is inherently always going to be unethical, right? And it always made it a little bit complicated for me because it was like, oh, you know what the scariest part of that story is the gay conversion therapy. And I was like, the scariest part of that story was somebody being forced into therapy, like to change their life. Like, that's not okay. And like to have a quality in themselves being changed. But anyway, in recent years, there's been people that have committed suicide because of it, because they went through this experience. It was very damaging to them. It really wounded their identity, and then the external pressures and things like that. So there's been a lot of suicide that's been related to it. And in the United States, a lot of individual states have passed laws saying, okay, we're banning gay conversion therapy, and they sort of define that as any attempt to try to change a sexual or gender identity of a person. And it sounds like the United Kingdom Kingdom has just done that as well. United Kingdom is interesting, Nick, because that would be an entire national ban on this practice, whereas in the United States, it's only happened state by state.
So there are still states in the United States where it's still allowed.
Yes, yeah. In fact, most of the states it's still allowed, and then 1 and 2s. There's probably about half a dozen at this point that have banned it.
Okay. So I assume. I think this is a good thing,
right?
I assume you're on that page too.
Yeah, you would assume wrong. So, like I said in the beginning, I testified to the Nevada legislature whenever they were debating this ban. I testified against it. I said, don't ban it.
You son of a bitch.
I know. It's the weirdest damn thing. All right, so a couple of points here.
Yeah, let's hear this.
So first off, I'm a Christian, and I'm in private practice, and I pretty much wear that on my sleeve. So what was happening was I was getting people for years who would come to me. I think the year that this happened, I had a client who brought their child to me. He was a teenage boy, and he was gay. And they wanted me to do gay conversion therapy and help him understand that this is not who he really is. I made them sign a thing saying, I understand Jim's not going to do that, right? Like, I told them, hey, no, I will not do that. I will not, do gay conversion therapy. I'm not going to try to change this kid's identity, right? But I'm happy to meet with your child and find out what's going on, right? Because he's a teenager. They're malleable. I'm going to treat this through the lens of any sexual experience that's happening in teenage years. Because the kid was doing, like, sexually self-destructive things. Let's look at that, right? Let's just look at a kid not having very, healthy sexual boundaries and things like that. Okay. So I was already banning it in a sense of I would not do it. So the reason why I testified against a ban, and hear me out, it had nothing to do with believing that it's okay to do this to people, okay? It has to do with this, Nick. The government is the least qualified actor to step in and start deciding exactly which techniques we're going to do and for exactly what reasons. We already have governing bodies to make those decisions, and those governing bodies determine whether or not we keep our licenses. We have panels of colleagues who evaluate decisions we make based on the harm that it causes and based on its consistency with our ethical codes. We already have ethical codes that prohibit doing anything like that. If you're doing gay conversion therapy, and I've had this happen too, Nick. I've had a person come in and say, I have feelings that I don't want to have. I am an adult, and I am asking for your help to evaluate these feelings that I don't want to have and help me come to different places. Now, if they were telling me I have sexual feelings toward children and I don't want to have these, I have a responsibility to assist him in the work he decides he wants. He gets to set the goals of the treatment plan, right? And if he comes in and says, I have feelings toward men and I don't want to feel them, obviously I believe that, that's a little bit more ingrained than he realizes, right? And I'm going to try to help him self-discover that, be at peace with yourself. But at the end of the day, we're going to work toward the goals he wants. If Johnny Government comes in, Johnny Law comes in, Uncle Sam comes in and tells me, no, Jim, that violates a boundary that we've established as citizens voting because it's unpopular right now because we've heard scary things in the news, that's problematic to me. And so the testimony I gave to the Nevada government was, guys, do you do this in any other field of medicine? Do you personally start codifying in black letter law which specific procedures we're not going to do and which ones we are going to do? Because that's never been the purpose of law. That has never been the status of what the Assembly does and the Senate does and the governor does. They have appointed boards to oversee medical disciplines, and those boards have the authority to put you in jail, take away your license, litigate against you, fee you, anything if there's a report. And they can put out a statement, like the social work board could put out a statement tomorrow saying, hey, we do not see this as an ethical practice. If you're doing it in these ways, do not do it. And there you go. It's now banned in your state, and you didn't need to codify it in law. But I don't like the precedent of each medical discipline basing what they're going to do and not going to do, not based on collegial stuff and scientific research and rigor, but on popular opinion making its way through the government. I just don't think that's a good way to govern medical practice.
So you want it legislated by the specific boards, LMFT board, CPC board, or social work board, not through the government.
Yeah. So in the year before this happened in Nevada, there was a transgender teenage person. Her name was Leila Alcorn. She went to a Christian conversion therapist. Parents forced her to. She ultimately committed suicide, and she blogged about it first on Tumblr. So this made national news. I was brought into NPR to talk about this as a Christian therapist. Remember that?
Yeah.
And my point on that show was, A, this is not what Christian therapists believe. Like, we're not trying to change you. We don't necessarily care. And I also made this point that I believe Jesus is the person standing in between the stone throwers and the persecuted, not throwing a rock, right? But then I also said, they were like, well, do you think that this should be banned in law? And I was like, well, no, but that's not because I'm in defense of the practice. It's because I don't like that as an instrument for how you decide what medical practices happen. The person who did this kind of harmful therapy has a board they should be answering to. But we're all trying to play too close to the tennis net and not letting the board do its job. We're trying to intercept the problem with law. And it's like, you don't need to do that. That board's going to rip that person to shreds. They're going to lose their license. Their parents could criminally prosecute that therapist. There's already a whole pack of consequences that should and will happen to a therapist who malpractices like that. We don't need to go further and create like all these new boundaries that cause questions in the field. I just don't think that's necessary.
Okay, so you and I are in agreement that using this form of therapy is harmful.
Yes.
Not just like, well, it's ineffective.
Right.
But actually can do harm.
Yes.
So we are on the same page there. We are on the same page saying that no one should be doing this.
Yes. Nobody should be doing... But, okay, yes, and I want to add to that, right? So... Obviously, anybody who is brought in, tied to a chair, and told, we're going to change you whether you like it or not, that is so anciently unethical, right? We don't do that anymore. We don't do insane asylums. We don't do against your will. Now we have informed consent, treatment goals derived from the patient, things like that, right? So if a patient comes in, though, and says, I am struggling with my sexual identity for a lot of personal reasons, it is not okay for me to feel the feels that I have for this same gender or whatever. I want to address that here. I have an ethical burden to hear out their treatment goals and to not let my culture influence their culture. So let's say I'm personally gay, and you come to me and say, I am feeling gay thoughts and I don't want them. Help me deal with this. If I go, well, listen, being gay is awesome. I'm gay. You should be gay. You should embrace it. You're repressing your desires. For me to come out that way, that's allowing me, my personal beliefs as a therapist, to influence the patient's goals. That's my culture clashing with theirs, right? I shouldn't allow that. So the same happens in vice versa. Like if that person comes in and says, I have these goals, I need to help them get to those goals or help illuminate those goals. So but right now, if you ban it, I'm not even allowed to have that conversation. The way the law is written, I'm not even allowed to address his homosexual desires, even if he wants to address them with me. I have to be deathly careful because I could violate the law. And this is why I don't want the law to impose itself into the therapeutic room. The session is a sacred place. We need to follow that conversation wherever it naturally goes. And so if this person wants to challenge their sexual beliefs, and we're going to do that in our session, I'm comfortable with that. That's his treatment goal. And I'm not going to define what's right and wrong for him. I'm just going to hear him out. But if it's causing him a clinically significant amount of distress because he desires the same sex, and that's problematic for his life, let's discuss it. And I think that that's fair. But right now, with a ban, you can't even do that. Nick, here's the deal. I'm kind of libertarian on this. I believe that the free market will weed out bad actors and best practices will come to the front. Because in 2,000 years, 3,000 years of medicine, that's exactly what's happened. We haven't needed governments to tell us how to do psychology. We haven't needed governments to tell us how to do pediatrics. Those fields rise to the top on their own. The best practices rise to the top. Bad actors tend to get scorned and kicked out of the field. And we have self-correction mechanisms to do this. We don't need the government. I
would somewhat agree with that. The only part where I may disagree with is that I don't know as if that's going to solve the problem on its own. Because you look at every state being completely different. For example, our next door neighbor, Arizona, as we've discovered, seems like it's kind of the lawless West.
I thought we were.
Yeah, I thought we were too. And then we discovered Arizona.
We met Arizona.
And there's no laws. There is nothing you cannot do in Arizona.
Yeah.
So is it fair to the people of Arizona, because they maybe their board is weaker than other boards across the state, is it fair to the people of Arizona that this practice that we know is ineffective and even worse is harmful can still happen because their boards aren't on top of it?
Oh, that's a good point. So what I think I hear you saying is the population of a state that doesn't have a strong board to protect the
they're going to be the victims.
They're vulnerable because people might do this practice. Actually, that's a strong point, Nick. Here's my counter argument, though.
Okay.
You're not describing gay conversion therapy as the enemy in that. You're describing medical malpractice. You're describing somebody attempting to do psychotherapy who is not licensed for it, and that was the very first crime. The fact that they also tried to do gay conversion therapy, and that's harmful to the population, they're already unlicensed.
Well, maybe not. I mean, what if they have a license?
I guess so, but then it comes down to if the state assembly and senate has the time and the awareness and the interest in mental health to pass a restrictive law, I would much rather see them bolster that board.
I would too.
Let the colleagues police the field.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. But if they're not, then what?
Right. I get it. I mean, like the UK passes this thing and says, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. Again, my only gripe about it is I don't like to see government and the political winds deciding what we're doing in a session.
Sure.
Because it also introduces limits into what should be an unlimited experience. You're supposed to be allowed to tell me anything. But if now there's boundaries and I know that I could be breaking the law by even listening to you talk about how you have struggles with your sexuality and how you feel internally conflicted, that's problematic for me, man. I don't want to be told how to do therapy.
Yeah, no, I get that. But is that gay conversion therapy? I mean, if I have somebody who's coming in and they are uncomfortable with their sexuality and they just want to talk about it and they want to explore that, we can do that, and that doesn't necessarily, in my mind, doesn't constitute gay conversion therapy.
And that's the question, though, is because you're a therapist and you're thinking it through carefully and comparing it to ethics and comparing it to standards of best practices that you've seen in the field. An assembly member's not going to do that. A judge is not going to do that. The beat cop is not going to do that. They're going to look at the law, and it's going to say, no attempt shall be made to alter the sexual orientation of a patient, ever. Period.
Well, that's where you just get into careful note writing.
Yeah. I've committed all sorts of crimes. I just write them up.
Well, no, but I mean, if I'm documenting this as I am exploring this with the client,
right?
I'm not suggesting, I'm not pushing them one direction or the other. I'm just helping them sort out their thoughts and feelings.
But what you just said is the key phrase that I want you to zoom in on. I'm going to win you over to my side.
Okay.
Watch.
All right.
Here's the key phrase, because you said, well, I'm not going to influence their decision. I'm just exploring it with them. The reason you can make that statement confidently, and I know that you would never influence them, I know that you would just listen to them, is because you're a good therapist. Because you already have ethics and lots of training and best practices that have taught you never to influence the client, right?
Right.
We already don't do that. So you're not describing gay conversion therapy as something that was always an orthodox practice that we need to take away from the table of good ideas. It was always in the trash bin of unethical ideas. It's up there with changing somebody's religion. If they come in and go, hi, I'm a Buddhist, and you're like, all right, we're going to fix that. You should lose your license. Like right there, you should lose your license because you're imposing culture and influence onto a person to try to take away something from them or change a perspective of them that you don't personally align with. Inherently, that was in the trash bin of unethical ideas. So is gay conversion therapy.
So who has been doing gay conversion therapy? Are they actually licensed therapists, or does this tend to be more clergy?
It has tended to be more clergy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and but that comes back to your point about Arizona, right?
Right.
Because licensed therapists have a board to answer to. They're usually highly trained. If they're doing this, it's very, very rare. It's very, very rare. Usually it turns out to be a pastor or like some kind of church that has like a ministry where there's like little counseling guys and they're not necessarily licensed. So usually these kinds of bans are a shot across the bow to all those organizations to say, hey, you will not do this.
Gotcha.
That's not allowed. And to that extent, it's fine. But it doesn't usually caveat that, hey, and let therapists do their job. Like, we're not here to dictate how therapy is going to happen.
So if there was... Okay, so let me throw this at you, because this may sway the argument a little bit.
Okay.
If there was clergy out there doing gay conversion therapy, and there's no law against that, and they are not answering to a board, then it just continues.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping them from doing it. It's the same as life coaching. You don't need a license to be a life coach, at least here in Nevada. You can just open up shop and call yourself a life coach and do it. So what's to stop me from being a life coach and imposing my religious beliefs, or lack thereof, on somebody and doing gay conversion therapy?
All right, good question. Here's my counterpoint. Okay. I like this debate that we're having. This is an academic debate. If we start policing all possibly harmful things that institutions, religious or not, do to members of that institution, and align that with what is helpful, what is hurtful, and start passing laws to stop them from doing everything, where does it end, right? True. So if you voluntarily align with a faith, you say, I vote Episcopalian, that's the team I like, and then you start having beliefs or feelings that are inconsistent with the team you like, and so then you go to the coach of that team and say, hey, I have thoughts and feelings that are no longer consistent with our team principles, and that coach says, let me help train that out of you, and we say, we're going to stop you from doing that. We're passing laws about gay, therapy, gay conversion. Why can't it also be Republican? You can't vote Republican, or you can't vote Democrat. Hey, I'm having strong thoughts that maybe I'm feeling liberal, and I feel like we should have a generous tax policy that redistributes wealth to the poor. Whoa. We're Southern Baptists. We don't do that. Well, I mean, that's kind of how I feel. Well, let's have counsel about that, right? You voluntarily align with our team. That's inconsistent with the stated rules of our team. We publish this on the internet. You know that. I know that. Let's discuss and get congruence. Well, then we go, whoa. We're not going to have this kind of political conversion counseling, okay? We're not going to allow it. Like, you can't. So, like, my question is, where does it end, right? And so I can see this as a unique thing, because we could say that people that are in that vulnerable place are a special population. And I think that the government has a good history of passing special rules to protect special populations. So in that light, it's fine. But I struggle with it, Nick, because I don't do that, but I don't do it because it's in the trash can of ethics. Like, you don't do it anyway. Just like you don't change their religion or try to change their political persuasion. Like, why would you do that? Like, you're there to work on the problems they define, and only through the lens of what is ethical. But I don't know, but the UK did it, so good job, Britons, and I ultimately think it's well-spirited anyway. I think it's a good idea.
Well, I would agree. I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how much do we want law coming into play.
Yeah, it's hard to have this conversation as you're sitting here sipping a pina colada, though. It is weird.
Get over it.
Listen, I accept you.
I'm not changing my ways.
I'm not. All of our UK listeners are like, should I report this? I feel like Jim was just trying to convert Nick.
So actually, this would be a good thing for our listeners. Write in, let us know your thoughts.
Yeah,
I'm kind of interested to get everybody's take on that.
Yeah, we usually take questions from listeners, but I'd love to take comments. Just people writing in and going, so last week's episode you said this, and I think Jim's an idiot. That'd be fine.
I'm writing that email right now.
Yeah, Nick's typing as we go.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we will discuss recreational drug use. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and it's time to read our listener mail. So, Nick, this first question is, should I tell my therapist about my recreational drug use?
Okay.
Before I even read this, I'm thinking, yeah, I'd like to know.
Yeah.
It's usually a good thing to know. All right, here's what the listener writes. I have not seen a therapist in about 3 years, but I will be seeing a new therapist soon for depression, and probably bipolar 2. I also have anxiety issues. I am not taking any prescription medications right now. I know that the doctors and therapists will ask about drug use, but I'm uncomfortable discussing that with them. I've experimented with recreational drugs on occasion, but I don't use drugs regularly. I smoke marijuana several times per year. I've had cocaine 3 or 4 times. I've smoked DMT twice, and I've used normal doses of LSD several times. I've found micro doses of LSD to be helpful in managing my symptoms without any psychedelic effects and without the side effects I got when I was on antidepressants. My symptoms predate my drug use, and I don't use any recreational drugs when my symptoms are more severe. I don't believe there is anything morally wrong with using recreational drugs, and I don't feel like it has caused any negative effects in my life. I am comfortable with the risks I'm taking, and I believe that I use drugs responsibly. I don't intend to mix any recreational drugs with prescribed medications. I worry that if I tell my therapist and psychiatrist about it, that they will be unwilling to prescribe medications to me that they would otherwise recommend. I feel like it's not relevant to my treatment, but I also don't like being dishonest about it. What risks am I taking by disclosing my drug use to my doctors? Will that become part of my medical records? If I tell my therapist but not my psychiatrist, will that information be shared? I will be using the health services of my Native American tribe. Are they bound to the same confidentiality protections as non-tribal therapists? If I knew that there would be no downside, I wouldn't mind discussing it, but I feel like once I bring it up, that bell can't be unrung, and I worry that I will regret it later. Thank you for any advice and clarity that you can bring to the situation.
Okay, that was really good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really good, interesting questions in this. So, first off, I guess I'm going to try to answer as many of these questions as I possibly can. You know, with the question of should I tell my therapist, psychiatrist, or both, one or the other?
And you know, another thing too, Nick, I have to define some terms in here.
Yes.
I mean, the average listener doesn't know what microdoses are, might not even know what some of these drugs are.
Right.
What is bipolar 2? There's a lot there.
Right. So I guess the important ones to note here, microdosing essentially is taking a small enough dose of the substance where you're not getting kind of the full effect, I guess you would say.
Right.
Or if we're talking about like a hallucinogen, you're not getting the intense hallucinations that you would normally get. You're getting just kind of a little bit of a smaller sensation. DMT is dimethyltryptamine.
Molly, right?
No, it's not. That's MDMA. DMT is an active ingredient in like ayahuasca.
Oh, okay.
So that's one of the main active ingredients. It's basically what you need to know is it's a hallucinogen.
And that's the thing, is like the writer talks about taking hallucinogenics, and they talk about microdosing. Microdosing is sort of this new fad where I'm seeing it all the time. People are like, I'm not a drug addict. I don't have the problems that other people have.
Right.
But I microdose on LSD. And I'm like, what? You microdose on LSD? And they're like, yeah, it helps my creativity. It, helps me get through the day. And it kind of reminds me of those old movies where the guy would have like a little canister of cocaine and he'd take like a pinch of it and snort it in his nose and like another pinch in the other nostril, and then they like do that and
Right.
and they take it all in. And so it's like this fashionable new way to like use drugs in like a responsible way. Like I'm just taking little puffs throughout the day, and I'm not like hallucinating dragons, but I'm seeing the world from a new perspective.
Well, I mean, and I'm not really, at this point, I'm not going to come out and take a stand one way or the other on that, because I'm always the type where I want to know where the research leads, right? And there has been some interesting research looking at its effects and how it's used to treat PTSD, things like that. So I'm open-minded. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other yet. I mean, as far as who to tell and how much to tell, as far as your therapist and psychiatrist, I'd say tell them both, to be honest. It's one of the things that Jim always likes to say, somebody you never lie to is your tailor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sucking in your gut while you're getting fitted for your pants, you're only fooling yourself.
Don't lie to your tailor.
It's only going to hurt you in the long run. Your therapist is kind of the same way. If you're going into therapy and you're not being 100% honest, what's the point?
Right.
You're not really going to get the full effect. Most therapists that I know of are going to be very open-minded about this. They're not going to, it's not something that they're going to look down on you for. They're going to appreciate the honesty, number one. And it's something that they can work with you on. As far as the psychiatrist, you mentioned in there that they might not prescribe or would be unwilling to prescribe medications that they otherwise would have. Probably, but that's a good thing.
Right.
Like you want your psychiatrist to know this information, because if they're prescribing medication, it could be ineffective if you're using other substances, or could be harmful if you're using other substances. Even if it's not harmful, if it's just ineffective, well then again, you're kind of wasting your time. You're wasting your copay on this medication that isn't going to provide you the results that you're looking for, and your psychiatrist and your therapist are going to be wondering, why are we not seeing any results? We're doing this treatment. This should be working. It's always best just to be upfront and honest with them as you are explaining all this.
I agree. And, you're only fooling yourself. And I can see what the person's doing. And I've seen this before, Nick, where they don't trust the process, right? And they're like, well, the drugs are not the issue. I don't want that to become a red herring. I want you to focus on my symptoms, right? But you have bipolar 2, which inherently is going to require probably some kind of mood stabilizer or antipsychotic.
Right.
So for that psychiatrist to approach this authentically, honestly, he needs data, right? We are medical professionals. Give us data. But anytime you lie to us or you withhold things from us, you could be robbing us of insight that could have been very important to the process. Maybe it's not very important to the process, but we're also professional enough to know when it's not and discard what isn't important and keep what is. So you just very carefully describe to us exactly what you use and exactly how often you use it. Tell that to the psychiatrist. If you do that, now, I'm not guaranteeing that every psychiatrist on the planet is very professional. I have colleagues that panic, or whatever. But I didn't panic over what you just told me. That was good data for me. That gives me a lot of insight into your situation, right? And I think the psychiatrist needs that information too, especially if you want prescriptions. He needs to be able to assess all of that. He's not going to deny you prescriptions. They're not going to do that. They're going to put prescriptions out there with a better understanding as far as what else might be in your system in a given week. And they're also going to give you advice and tell you, okay, so the thing I'm about to give you, under no circumstances can you take LSD with this one, right? And they're gonna counsel you on that. Their job is to tell you about the chemistry.
Yeah. And, and the other thing that I think is important to point out here, the other question that you asked is about confidentiality, and that being, a concern of yours. Is it going to go in your medical record? Well, it will with that agency. But here's the other thing that's important to remember, too. I actually consulted a good friend of ours, and she was actually on the show, Sydney Smith.
Oh, yeah, Sydney.
She was up on episode, 4 or something like that. She is a member of a Native American tribe, so she's Cherokee back in Oklahoma.
I'm pretty sure she's Cherokee here too, Nick.
I don't know if it works that way. Okay, well, we'll get back to that. You may be right. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure Sydney's always Cherokee. But no, that's fine. Your theory's good.
We'll see. It's neither here nor there. Either way, the important thing, I consulted her about that, and she actually had an interesting take on this. And she said that, because I was kind of wondering, are they bound by the same confidentiality laws?
If they're under the same memorandum of understanding.
Well, no, but as a tribe, they are sovereign.
Oh, that's right.
Now,
so does HIPAA even apply?
She said, not necessarily. However, if they're accredited, then they have to follow all these standards, confidentiality being one of them. So most of the tribes that she is aware of have JCO accreditation. Okay. So if they are accredited, they have to follow the same confidentiality laws as everybody else. Okay. But she also pointed out something that I thought was really interesting too, is that there is a lot of mistrust in the Native American community with confidentiality when using the tribe's resources.
Okay.
So one of the things that she suggested is that if that is a big concern for you, you might be better off going outside the tribe, getting your own private therapist, your own private psychiatrist, if you're really worried about confidentiality.
Yeah.
I think that's better if that's something that's going to prevent you from getting help, is fear of opening up, then you're better off going outside the tribe and getting your own help.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, another thing, too, that I think is really interesting to sort of unpack there. So we talked, or one thing that, this person's writing about is inside of the tribe, I have that mistrust. If you replace Native American tribe here with military, with Air Force, with police, I see that all the time.
Yeah.
In my private practice, I would say if I had to pick a demographic of people that find their way to me a lot, we have an Air Force base out here in Las Vegas, Nellis Air Force Base. I have a lot of people that come to me from Nellis, and they basically come in and go, I came to you because you don't take my insurance. I specifically want somebody who has never even had a conversation with TRICARE, with the government.
Right.
I want to talk to somebody, they don't even know you exist.
Right.
And I get that, right? Because they're like, I have top secret clearance, man. I'm really trying to just keep my truth to myself. And if they want to tell me, hey, I smoke marijuana, that would lose their entire career at the base, right? But this is a safe place. I can keep their secret. And so confidentiality, Nick, is like the cornerstone
Absolutely.
of all effective therapy. But, I think that the same advice that Sydney gave to this writer could really apply to anybody if you are... and I've seen emails like that where they're like, hey, I get health insurance through my employer, right? But like in theory, my employer is a party in all of this. Like even though they buy the insurance and the insurance hires the agency and I have to go to that agency because that's like the agency my insurance provides, it becomes really problematic. And, last week we answered a question of like how to find online therapists and what we think about that. And, we both came out with like a ringing endorsement of online therapy. And this is yet another reason where online therapy can kind of be comforting because you can look at it and go, these guys are like far, far away from anybody else in my life. Like sometimes that's really comforting to have somebody that isn't connected. But to that question, can the therapist tell the psychiatrist? It's possible, but I would say that's not likely. I don't think that that's a likely outcome. Well, I don't tell psychiatrists what's going on with the patient if we have them in common.
The other thing, though, is also if it's within the same agency, right? If the therapist and the psychiatrist work for the same company, then confidentiality, they can speak about your case together. And it would be very difficult to draw that line and that separation between the two. Now, if you see a therapist privately, and then you go to another agency and you work with that psychiatrist, then there has to be some sort of release of information, and you get to determine what information gets disclosed. But again, I really caution you to consider and think about the effects that you're going to experience withholding information about your case to the people trying to help you. I think at the end of the day, that's really what it boils down to. I think you're going to, not that it's going to cause a problem, but I think it's not going to produce the results that you want.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, on a final note, another thing I want to point out is this. You shared that you have bipolar 2, and you shared that you're on no medication for that. That, historically, in my work, is not a good recipe. I have not seen that be very successful. So for the listener, because we are an educational program, we want to make sure people are hearing and understanding words that we use, there is a disorder called bipolar, and a lot of people misuse this word, and they describe every teenage girl as being bipolar. And they say, oh, well, one day she's happy, and the next day she is not. She is bipolar. That is not bipolar. That is called teenage. Like, that is adolescence. That's just having mood fluctuations, right, or mood swing. Bipolar does not even necessarily have a lot to do with mood swing, so much as it has to do with what we call mania. So if you have bipolar 1, then you're usually experiencing what we call a manic episode at some point. Mania is like this high, in the clouds, flightedness, extreme energy, mowing your lawn at 2 a.m., terrible judgment, right? Shopping spree, gambling it all away, using drugs, using alcohol, nothing taking you down, not sleeping for days. It's like being on meth without the meth. And you enter into this delusion, this hallucination. It's a form of psychosis in which you do not have the ability to parse reality from fiction. Now, in bipolar 1, we see that there's mania and then there's major depression. So you go from one end of the spectrum, extremely high energy, outside of your brain, sort of like happiness, glory, joy, but it's like psychotically weird, all the way down to really powerful depression. In bipolar 2, it's the same dynamic, but you have hypomanic episodes, which means just underneath mania on one end of the bar, and then on the other end of the bar, a major depressive episode. So to the writer, a hypomanic episode can be still very, very serious. And, it still comes with that extremely elevated energy and activity. It still comes with that nearly out-of-body experience of inflated self-esteem and grandiosity, decreased sleep, more talkative, all those things that come with it, the flight of ideas. And that means that it's probably outbalancing your life. And so playing with recreational drugs when you have a pretty, honestly severe mental illness is inherently something that demands you talk to your psychiatrist, right? And I'd be saying the same thing to somebody who had diabetes. And they were like, but I'm absolutely, I love Pixie Sticks, and I just jam on a box of Pixie Sticks, but I don't want to tell my endocrinologist that I do that because I don't want that to influence how he does insulin prescription. Guess what, champ? That inherently is in his wheelhouse. You have to tell him that because you're playing a game with a mental illness that is pretty serious, and I don't like that that's happening.
I think a big part of this goes back to the fear that they're going to tell me to stop.
Yeah.
If I explain what I'm doing, they're going to tell me to stop doing it. But at the end of the day, you and your helpers need to work together. You got to be on the same team. They can't force you if you don't want to. So that, that's not going to happen. Just be open about it. Explain the situation, and most likely they're going to work with you.
Yeah, I agree. And last point, as an addictions counselor, though, whenever I hear somebody saying, I'm scared they're going to tell me to stop using these drugs, but don't worry, these drugs are definitely not a problem in my life. Okay, maybe they're not, but that's interesting. That's interesting that these drugs call to you, that they have enough power in your life that you're hiding information from your medical team. Right? Like, I have to notice that dynamic, and maybe you're not addicted to them, but I do have to ask, do these have more power, more relationship in your mind than maybe you're willing to admit? And is that something you're willing to take a look at?
It's a good point. It doesn't necessarily mean addiction, like you said.
Yeah.
It just how much effort you're putting into defending it. Maybe take a look at that.
It's worth taking a look at. Yep. How much do you love them damn Pixie Sticks? Enough to risk your diabetes? Let's talk about it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we talk about depression, shame. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. And this next question is from a man who is ashamed of his depression. I want to tell someone I'm depressed, but find it hard to open up about it with anyone, my wife included. Even as a kid, I felt the need to be the rock for my loved ones in difficult times. How do I ask for help when I'm afraid to let people down? Thanks, Anonymous.
Thank you, Anonymous. And that's one of the amazing things, Nick, that we've heard so often, is that people that are going through depression, they often feel ashamed of it. And we've noticed this with everybody. I've seen it in women. I've seen it in men. It's hard to say I've seen it in one more than the other. I've seen moms, right? Moms who have little kids, and they're in charge of taking care of this family, and they're trying to hold it together. They feel overworked, overburdened, overstressed, over-relied upon, and their depression is there, and their depression is real. But they're terrified to take care of themselves or let anybody know that they need help because they're just like, well, who's going to help me? Nothing's going to change. And this writer is a man, and I've seen that happen too, where the man's like, hey, I'm the rock of my family. I'm the guy that's consistent. Everybody else is allowed to feel pain and allowed to go through stuff. But I'm scared to have any weakness because that might scare my loved ones.
Yeah, and my advice would be to take a look at the meaning that you're giving asking for help. I think there's a lot there that maybe we can unpack. Your question implies that asking for help would give others the appearance of being let down or that they would be disappointed. What evidence do you have for that? And then let's turn the table. If other people in your life who you look up to are asking for help, do you see them as weak?
Right.
Because I think sometimes people start, they hold themselves to standards that they wouldn't hold other people to. Right. And so if I see somebody who means a lot to me and they're asking for help, I may look at that and say, well, good for them. This shows strength in asking for help. But when it's me, then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm weak.
Right. Yeah. What's funny is, as you were saying that, it reminded me of going to the gym. So around every January, I suddenly realized I need to go to the gym.
You're one of those guys.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys. About 90% of America.
Captain America, my
Captain
ass.
America, yeah. So what's interesting, I am America. So can you. Whenever I would go to the gym, here I am feeling like, there's people here that look amazing. And then, there's me, and I'm like, plugging away at this machine. And I always would feel like self-conscious about it and be like, I shouldn't be here. This is for those guys. And I remember at one point I had a fit-friendly friend, and I was telling them about this, and they were like, no, man, we're rooting for you.
Yeah.
Like, we see you doing that, and we're like, keep at it. This is exactly the place where you should be working on this, and you should have no shame. Like, this is where we want you to be.
Yeah,
and when we see you guys going for it, we like that.
Yeah, it's the same when I go to the gym all the time. I see that, and I see
when you drag your fat ass into the gym, Nick.
You got a great ass.
Yeah, you do.
But
I'm looking at it, guys. And actually, we did a disservice to the listener. We didn't explain that you're wearing your American flag banana hammock. It looks delicious.
Yeah. I like the attention I get.
Yeah, a lot of people staring at us.
But yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people who are new to the gym, and I was like that too. Going in there and feeling really self-conscious, and I don't want other people to see how little I'm lifting.
Right.
But in all reality, no one cares because no one's looking. Everybody's focusing on themselves.
Yes.
It's the most egocentric place in the world. Everybody is focusing on them. They don't even know you're there.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is like, everybody has a starting point. It was the same way when I was golfing. When I see somebody who's, I get paired up with somebody who's kind of new at golf, and they shank one off to the left on their tee shot, and then they feel bad, and they're like, oh, sorry, and they feel really embarrassed. I'm like, dude, we've all been there. Like everybody started someplace.
Right.
That's something to remember. It's no one's fooling themselves and thinking that they're perfect.
And to the writer, the things we're talking about, I want to apply to your story here, because you're saying, I'm scared to get help. I'm scared to be needy. I'm scared to be at that starting point. I'm scared of what it means to not have it all together. But you're comparing yourself to people that have already been working on this. You're comparing yourself to the guy who's, he's maxing out today at the gym and he's doing really good, or the guy who's a scratch golfer and you're kind of starting and you're scared to be at that low end of the stick, or, to seem vulnerable or to seem shaken or to not seem like you have it all together. But the point we want you to take away is, you got to start somewhere, and getting help for yourself is how you continue to be the rock for your family. And this is the myth I see you writing into this, is you're creating a false choice. Either I'm going to continue to be the rock for my family, or I'm going to get help. What you fail to realize is, by getting help, you will continue to be the rock for your family.
Absolutely.
That is the only path forward, where you continue to be a reliable partner and a bedrock member of this family, is if you're continuing to take care of yourself, right? And we bring this up all the time, Nick. That when you're on an airplane, the stewardess people tell you, hey, if we lose cabin pressure, these little thingies are going to fall from the sky, and you're supposed to put these masks on your face, right? And then they always say, if you're traveling with an elder or with a child, put your mask on first and then theirs.
Yes.
You have to take care of you in order to take care of them. That is actually the most responsible thing that you can do.
Yeah, I would really like to see you challenge the idea that you have about vulnerability being a bad thing.
Right.
Them seeing you being vulnerable is a bad thing. I would really want you to challenge that idea, because I really disagree with that. I think them getting the chance to see you as being vulnerable and to see, hey, he's going through some stuff too, can be what they need. That actually can be helpful. If you have somebody in your life that you feel like, man, things are always, I see Jim's life and everything's always going so well for Jim.
With his Captain America shirt.
Everything always works out for Jim, and he's got nothing to worry about, and everything's wonderful. To be able to see that person struggle a little bit too, that may be like, oh, you know what? I'm not alone.
Right.
We all go through this. But he does it so well. He handles adversity really well. I can learn from that. So them seeing you as being vulnerable isn't a bad thing. It can actually be very powerful. It can help them and motivate them.
I agree. And I think be solution focused. I can understand that you don't feel comfortable just sitting your family down or your wife down and telling her, hey, I'm really struggling with this stuff, and not having an answer in your pocket. And that's why I challenge you to be solution focused, right? Contact your family doctor, look up a therapist, go through your work insurance, and call the little number on the back of the insurance card and just sort out your options. Do some scouting, because then you can sit down with your wife and say, so, I've been going through something. Here are the options I've found to kind of deal with it. I'm keeping you in the loop because you're my wife and you deserve to know about my health, but I am working on it. I think that satisfies your need to not seem like you're completely helpless, but also satisfies the need to tell the truth about your situation and get the help that you deserve.
Yeah.
But
please write in. Let us know.
Yeah, talk to us, man. And good for you for reaching out. Because, this listener, Nick, says it's hard to open up to anybody. They really stressed, being anonymous. Mm-hmm. And listen, Anonymous, good job, man. Thank you for writing into our show. And I want to tell you that we receive the gift that it is to have earned your trust, that you felt comfortable enough writing in, that you trusted our thoughts and you were willing to receive them today. That to us as therapists is one of the greatest things that anybody can show us, is that they've given us a measure of their trust. And so we receive that.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're glad we can help.
Yep. And to anybody else out there who's struggling with stuff, write in, guys. Write in. Let us know. You probably can predict what we're going to say. We're usually going to say go find a therapist. But we'll give you a little bit of coaching on the sideline, too, to get you ready for that. Mm-hmm. All right, that's all the time that we've got for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy or on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. Next week, we are going to have No, it's not going to be a bonus episode. It's going to be a bank episode because Jim's going to be gone.
He's hitting the beach.
Yeah. But I promise it'll still be a good episode. You have the Nick Tangeman guarantee.
Oh.
And I'm Nick Tangeman.
And I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.